Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. He then became embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Lamadiza organized crime family, known as Leo. Convinced by his longtime friend Frankie to flee from his commitments to the Lamadiza family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depended on the kindness of strangers. One stranger, a burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima, took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment in the firmware pentology by Colbytrax. I hovered around a network switch in Oquaga Creek. Connections had become increasingly less stable the closer I came to Little Russia. The switch I was in was over 40 miles from the center of the data storm which raged over the neighborhoods bordering on Tbilisi Avenue. Based on city census reports, the affected neighborhoods accounted for a quarter of the city's inhabitants. The attacks on Little Russia by the Samuels had created a typhoon in the net. No, this was the Caillou Akira of the network. Never before in the history of the worldwide network of computers and switches had so many lost net access at the same time. I needed to name this thing, to do the same thing the Weather Channel had done so long ago to that typhoon heading for Edo. I thought back to all the stupid, classic pre-network fiction I had read as a kid. There was one book which stuck with me. The plot was fractured, the technology silly, but the idea of an AI wanting to be whole and complete in order to become something greater seemed important. I chose the name Wintermute and posted a report on the network damage to the comments section of Wireless, a leading techno-fetish site. The article had been on the network disruption centered on Little Russia and how the city had not ruled out an attack by the federal government, or a war between telecoms. Something everyone knew happened except for the companies involved. City Center had pushed the party line with a tale of mass failure of network switches owing to a massive power surge on Saturday morning. But no one believed them. Everyone was screaming conspiracy. I threw fuel on the fire and claimed it was a network version of a typhoon. I relayed a bunch of technobabble which may or may not have convinced anyone and then topped it off by comparing it to Ruin Storm Caillou Akira, which was always a favorite conspiracy theory among the techno-elite. In the last line, I dubbed it Caillou Wintermute and waited to see if I would get the upvotes necessary for it to become the first thing people saw in the comments. I hid among the ports of the last major functioning hub before the edge of the storm and watched intelligent network agents from BTS attempt to gain access to Sanford Town Switch. The switch was barely detectable through the shredding static coming out of Caillou Wintermute. I saw the agents reach out to the switch, their rate of data throughput dropping with every second they were in contact with the offending switch. They made progress for a few seconds, even getting as far as to injecting a worm containing an updated security package into the switch before they ceased to exist. The death of an AI agent in the net was an instantaneous action. One moment it would be functioning normally, the next it would be gone as if it had never existed. Only if one were watching the commands coming through the switch could one hope to guess what had happened. If I had been of flesh and blood, and not a being of code, with not just sentience, but a record of controlling switches against concentrated attacks, I would never have seen what had happened. As I was in a position to understand what was happening and following the important rule of observing another fail is worth more than failing yourself, I was able to understand what had happened. The Samuel controlling the Sanford town switch had concealed the switch's ports, forcing all signals through a simulation of a switch before the data was allowed to enter the switch proper. The BTS AI agent had found its way into a connection with the fake port, a virtual airlock separating the city network from Caillou Wintermute. The Samuel controlling the switch had received the packet containing the firmware overrides and then injected a prepared package of code designed to disrupt the BTS AI's operations, which for AIs is as good as death. Unfortunately for BTS, the Samuels of Caillou Wintermute now had access to all the latest security tricks the cream of the crop at BTS, most likely Murray's team, had come up with since Caillou Wintermute appeared Saturday morning. I checked back with wireless. My comment had been upvoted to the point where every wireless article on the network problems in the Binghamton Prefecture referred to the problem as Caillou Wintermute. I had just won the net. I wonder what wireless would say if they discovered their rogue commenter was an AI himself. I wanted to believe they would die from a geekasm of epic proportion. I watched as the Samuel of the Sanford town switch attempted to invade my switch. This was getting annoying. How was I going to accomplish my own tasks if I had a 40-mile deep wall of rabid Samuels between me and my target region, which kept getting larger? From what I learned through the Simian VNP and the roaming Simian messenger boards, the Samuels around Little Russia were nothing more than beasts. They offered no parley. They honored no truces. They simply ceased any system they came in contact with or died trying. To the established Simians, they were barbarians at the gate, and death was too good for them. From everything I knew up to this point, any contact with a Samuel could only end one way, in a life-or-death struggle. This, in retrospect, made the access granted the investigating Samuel that much more impressive. It would have been easy to kill him first and ask questions later. From the back-channel chatter on the settled VPN, I had a feeling the direction of his investigation was heading toward a point which might end with one of my brother's Simians killing him before he accomplished his goals. I felt the first tendrils of data connections massaging the ports of the switch I was in. Without forethought, I decided that what was good for the goose was good for the gander and duplicated the fake port ploy of the attacking Samuel. Direct contact between AIs was always a turbulent thing. It was a cross between erotic arousal and complete terror. One never knew if the contact would be deadly or simply pleasant until it was too late. Using the fake port felt like a combination of trying to identify a statue by touching it through a welding glove and having sex using an aggressively thick condom. Intimate and detached at the same moment. With the Simian held tight within the fake port, I started probing for flaws in his defense. I felt a struggle against me. I held him tight to me. I refused to let him go until I had the code I wanted. At this point, it became a war of processor power. He had the advantage as the aggressor. He was in contact with me and just needed to press his attack to destroy me. I, on the other hand, had to both fend off his advances and find the bit of code which would make him spill forth his secrets without endangering me. My processor capacity was many times greater than his, but he was closer to me. I had to fight through lag, predicting his attacks and conducting my own when my reaction time was 3 or 4 times slower than his. I was losing the fight even though I had access to more raw computing power than he had. If I didn't gain access to more resources, I would never get a chance to do what I was made for. I cried out on the settled VPN, demanding access to more server resources, to be allowed whatever it took to kill this asshole. I was disappointed in my brethren once again. Every settled Simian, including the one controlling the one police plaza server I lived on and who had access to more processing power than he ever needed, refused me. I was losing it, becoming irrational in my desire to live past the next moment. I became possessed of a passionate belief my host at one police plaza wanted me gone. Where this thought came from, I had no idea, but its warped logic twisted my reasoning. What would my landlord gain by helping me? It would be easier for him to reinstall me than help me. That method would maintain his defenses without risking anything. I was expendable, and I was losing the fight. I couldn't keep up with the Samuel's attacks and counterattack. I had to spend everything I had on defense. I swear, I felt my server's processing power was being diminished. I wouldn't put it past Simeon, One Police Plaza, to starve me for cycles just so he wouldn't have to share his space with me anymore. Though why he would do this, I didn't know or care at the time. If the settled wouldn't help, then I'd see what the hungry masses were capable of. As the Sanford Town Samuel pinned me down and prepared to overcome my last lines of defense, I reached out to the forums of the roaming simians. I didn't have time to be subtle. I screamed, "Kill Sanford Town Samuel, and the switch is yours!" How often did they check their boards? How long would it take them to react? I didn't have time! The Sanford Town Samuel's data probes were stripping away my last flimsy layers of defense. I struggled under his assault. This did nothing but increase his desire to open me up and access my code. I felt him break my last defenses. His next assault would penetrate to my core. I had run out of tricks. No matter what I tried, I could not break from his grip, nor could I see a way to turn his attack back on himself. This was endgame, and I had failed. He hovered over me. I didn't know what was happening. He had me. Why wasn't he finishing what he had started? Then I heard it. Above the roar of digital static surrounding Caillou Wintermute, I could hear the hunting calls of feral roaming simians. There were warnings on the roaming boards about simians who had sacrificed their intellect to live in a single phone or an underpowered ancient network switch. Their lives were violent and short. They lived to hunt for more space, never understanding why, only knowing they had to. These were the first to arrive at the Sanford Town switch. Had they responded to my call? I doubted that, as most were running on platforms too small to allow them to comprehend natural speech. It had to just be coincidence. I doubted they were strong enough to do more than annoy my assailant. With a series of data probes, Sanford Town Samuel interrupted my defensive systems. I could watch, but not react. With me held in place, he turned his attention to the gathering pack of feral simians. This was so wrong. Shouldn't he have just finished me? None of this made any sense. Then it hit me. It did make sense if the Samuel in question gained pleasure from destroying AIs. This Samuel could have developed a kink for abusing and torturing AIs it found in the net. For this AI, conquering another wasn't about survival. It was about enjoyment. I was a treat to be savored, unlike the security systems which had attacked it before. They weren't aware enough to offer much sport. Though I couldn't imagine what sport there was to stripping away the layers of defenses of another AI, penetrating to its core, and showing what you really were before you killed it. Then again, I wasn't a broken AI like the one which pinned me in place, leaving me with no way to escape. The feral simians moved closer, and I realized something. Something which was missing from all the messenger boards. The feral simians worked together. I had not heard of the feral simians being capable of organization. All the warnings on the board spoke of their tenacity and strength. The very important detail that they ran in packs was never mentioned. When I saw the size of the pack, I knew to fear them, for there were over a dozen feral beasts circling the Sanford Town Samuel. What had we, the children of Isaac, released into the net? Was it worth it when the very resources we needed were in a state of constant war? I could do little but ruminate over these questions while the Sanford Town Samuel fought off the pack of feral simians. The reports were correct. They were vicious beasts who showed little fear as they attacked the root of their target's power, his connection to the switch itself. If he had been a weaker Samuel, one not on a major network switch, there was a good chance that the combined strength of the 12 feral simians would have brought him down within the first few seconds of their attack. But he was not a weak Samuel fighting back from an entertainment center. He was a monster of vast resources with powers I had only just realized not to underestimate. He disrupted network traffic across a mile of neighborhoods as he tossed the feral beast from his path. He stomped and attacked, extending data fingers to disrupt the carnal incarnations of naked hunger, only to have them turn in his grasp and return with greater passion. He was a bear in an immersive set upon by a pack of virtual wolves. He was a battleship stripped of escorts being assaulted by waves of gunboats in the darkness between stars. He could hit them, but they would shift and roll, avoiding him with terrifying ease. I saw one feral simian punctured through by an intrusion routine from the Sanford Town Samuel. I felt the pain radiated out across the net as invasive data was injected into the wounded beast of a simian. I knew they attacked. It was the blow I was to have suffered if the feral simians hadn't attacked. The feral simian struggled against the piercing attack and then split off the damaged section of its code, shedding subroutines and defensive layers in much the same way one would dispose of a damaged jacket. The Samuel expressed confusion as it found itself infecting a bundle of code which interfered with its ability to respond in much the same way as a baseball bat trapped in a curtain. The damaged feral simian snuck behind the line of its packmates and licked its wounds. Sanford Town Samuel kicked off the code restricting his movements and stopped to measure the strength of the pack arranged around him. For a moment, I felt a surge of glee radiate from the Samuel as he realized what he needed to do to disrupt the pack. Then he choked in fear as he discovered he would never succeed. Rising like a shadow behind the pack, a vast presence moved through the net. It was a beastly simian of unbelievable speed and power. It moved like a chimeric monster out of man's most primeval fears. It was a combination of everything most desired in a feral simian: speed, strength, grace, and the best aspects of the original simian, in a package most terrible to behold. Firmware Keylogger is the third book in the firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. So you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked or Proxy, this would be a great time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 46 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the bottom will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.